Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if pushing your body to the limit could be helped by well-altered states of mind? This study dives into how people are talking about using psychedelics for sports and physical activity. And spoiler alert, it is not quite what you might expect. So, imagine this. We've all heard about psychedelics being used for mental health or spiritual breakthroughs. But what about hitting a new personal best on a run or crushing it in a martial arts match? Researchers wanted to know if people were using these substances for physical stuff too, and how they felt about it. They looked at online discussions, specifically on Reddit, which is like a giant forum where people talk about all sorts of niche topics. They searched for things like sports psychedelics and dug through thousands of comments to see what real people were saying about their experiences. They found tons of conversations. Think of it like sifting through a huge pile of personal diaries, but online they gathered up these discussions and then started to sort them. The main goal was to figure out what impact, if any, people felt these substances had on their physical performance. They were also curious about which specific psychedelics were being used and at what doses. The researchers used a method called Qualitative Content Analysis. Basically, they read through everything and looked for patterns and recurring themes. They grouped these experiences into different categories. It is like finding themes in a book. You might find a theme about love, another about loss, and so on. Here, they found themes like physical performance enhancement, flow state automaticity, and even risks, limitations, and safety concerns. They also noted which drugs, like psilocybin mushrooms and LSD, were mentioned the most. What is super interesting is how people describe the effects. Many users reported feeling stronger, faster, or having more endurance. Some even talked about a better mind-body connection, feeling like they could control each muscle movement precisely. It sounds pretty impressive, right? One person even said that LSD gave them an energy boost that helped them move faster. But it wasn't just about feeling physically stronger. A lot of people talked about entering a flow state. You know that feeling when you are so completely absorbed in something, whether it is playing music, coding, or playing a sport. That time seems to disappear and everything just feels effortless. That is flow. The researchers found that many users felt psychedelics helped them reach this state more easily. They described automatic movements and a deep sense of being in the zone, almost like their bodies knew exactly what to do without them even having to think about it. Another big theme was how psychedelics seemed to sharpen perception and cognition relevant to performance. This included things like a better sense of where your body is in space, improved spatial awareness, sharper focus, and even a kind of enhanced visualization or anticipation of what is coming next. Think of a martial artist feeling like they can see punches coming a moment before they happen. Perhaps one of the most talked about benefits was a reduced perception of fatigue and pain. Imagine being able to push through that wall of exhaustion during a long run or intense training session, because you just don't feel the fatigue as much. Some users, like professional fighters, mentioned that the mental signals telling them to stop due to tiredness would just shut off. This is a big one, but it also ties into some of the risks. Because some users reported feeling less pain or fatigue, there were concerns about overexertion and injury. If your body isn't sending those warning signals, you might push yourself too hard, leading to problems later. One user mentioned that while they felt incredible during a strenuous bike ride, their legs were on fire for weeks afterward. So, while it might feel like enhancement in the moment, there can be consequences. Some also noted impaired judgment or worse performance in some cases. Many users specifically talked about microdosing, which means taking very small subperceptual doses of psychedelics. They described using these small doses as a strategy to subtly improve their athletic abilities, like helping with muscle training or even improving scores in golf. Beyond the physical, psychedelics were also discussed in terms of psychological and emotional benefits that indirectly helped with athletic performance. This included things like reducing ego, easing anxiety, breaking through mental blocks, and boosting motivation. Some athletes felt that by taking their ego out of the game, they could perform better, seeing sports like golf as a form of moving meditation. This brings up an important point: fairness in sports. Users themselves were debating whether using psychedelics should be considered cheating. They wondered about drug testing and the ethics of using substances that might give an unfair advantage. It is a complex issue, especially since psychedelics are currently illegal in many places. Now, here is a crucial part of the discussion. All of these accounts are from people telling us how they felt. They say they felt faster, stronger, or more coordinated. But did they actually perform better in a measurable way? The researchers highlight that it is hard to know. Psychedelics can change how we perceive ourselves and our abilities. It is possible that some of the perceived gains are due to a change in how users feel they are performing, rather than actual physiological improvements. This is similar to some microdosing studies where people feel better but objective tests don't always show a difference. The paper also touches on some fascinating brain science. Psychedelics can actually quiet down a part of the brain called the default mode network, which is linked to self-referential thinking and our sense of self or ego. When this network is less active, people often describe a feeling of ego dissolution or a loss of self-consciousness. This could be really beneficial in sports because it might lead to that effortless flow state where you are not overthinking or being self-critical. The researchers suggest this deactivation might be a key reason why people feel they can achieve better performance when they aren't bogged down by self-doubt. This study really pushes the idea that psychedelics might have effects beyond just treating mental health issues. It suggests they could potentially enhance all sorts of everyday activities, especially those that require high levels of concentration and skill. Interestingly, the paper points out that LSD, one of the most commonly mentioned psychedelics, seems to have properties similar to stimulants. It can promote wakefulness, and unlike some other psychedelics, trigger dopamine release. This might explain why users specifically reported surges of energy and endurance when using LSD, contributing to their perceived performance enhancement. Revisiting the pain and fatigue reduction, the research suggests that psychedelics might have actual anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving properties. This is consistent with some early scientific findings. So, it is not just in people's heads they might be feeling less pain. This could allow athletes to push their physical limits further. The paper also proposes that the connection to flow states might amplify this pain reduction, creating a powerful compounding effect. When it comes to microdosing, the paper acknowledges that while many users report subjective benefits like improved attention and creativity, rigorous scientific studies have often struggled to show these effects beyond a placebo. However, it also notes that even subperceptual doses might cause measurable changes in brain activity, suggesting there could be subtle neurological impacts, even if functional enhancement isn't always obvious. The psychological benefits are also a significant factor. Things like dissolving mental blocks and reducing performance anxiety can have a huge impact on how an athlete performs. The research mentions that psychedelics might help loosen rigid negative self-beliefs, which can be a major barrier holding athletes back. The ethical debate is ongoing, both among users and researchers. The study highlights that if psychedelics are seen as performance enhancers, it raises serious questions for sports organizations like the World Anti-Doping Agency, or WADA. The lack of clear regulations and potential safety risks, especially without proper guidance, could lead to negative consequences for athletes. It is important to remember the limitations of this study. Since it relied on Reddit discussions, the findings are based on self-reported experiences, and it is hard to verify the substances or doses consumed. Also, Reddit users tend to be younger and male, so the findings might not apply to everyone. And as we discussed, perceived benefits don't always equal actual measurable improvements. So, what is the big takeaway? Psychedelics might indeed have the potential to enhance physical performance, but not in the way traditional performance-enhancing drugs do. Instead of building muscle, they seem to work by altering consciousness, potentially removing psychological barriers that limit what we think we can achieve. They might be better called potential-enhancing substances rather than performance-enhancing drugs. They can help us tap into our existing abilities by shifting our mindset, reducing inhibitions, and maybe even inducing states of deep focus and flow. The mind-body connection is powerful, and by addressing mental blocks, physical performance can improve. The unique aspect that separates psychedelics from typical performance enhancers is this ability to induce a flow-like state, allowing people to go beyond mental limitations. Future research needs to look at this more closely, using controlled studies with athletes to see if these subjective feelings translate into real measurable gains. I think this research is incredibly fascinating because it highlights the complex relationship between our minds and our physical capabilities. It opens up a conversation about how altering our state of consciousness, whether through natural practices or now potentially through regulated substances, could unlock new levels of human potential not just in sports, but in many areas of life. There is clearly a lot more research to be done to understand the exact mechanisms and ensure safety, but it's an exciting frontier. What do you all think about this? Could psychedelics perhaps in carefully controlled ways become a tool for unlocking human potential? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you found this deep dive into psychedelics and sports interesting. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.